The crisp morning air, still clinging to the scent of damp earth and pine, offered little solace on Oak Valley Trail. Detective Elias Harding stood beside his patrol cruiser, hands tucked into his pockets, his gaze fixed on the turquoise SUV. It sat askew, its front right tire a grotesque, deflated mockery, a neat, deliberate slit visible in the sidewall. Not a blowout, he noted, but an incision, sharp and precise. A professional job, or at least a calculated one. Sheriff Ben Miller, a man whose face was etched with years of navigating Blackwood Falls quiet dramas, joined him, coffee thermos in hand. Morning, Elias. Not what you want to wake up to, is it? Harding grunted, his eyes scanning the scene, absorbing every detail. Morning, Ben. Looks like trouble found its way to the picturesque part of town again. The vehicle, a late model Volvo XC60, belonged to Eleanor Vance. Her name alone sent a low thrum of recognition through Harding. He'd seen her name in the local gazette, read about her art exhibition, and more recently, heard whispers about her divorce. The irony wasn't lost on him. A woman stepping into her own, only to vanish. A few feet from the flattened tire, partially obscured by a clump of fading autumn leaves, lay a shattered cell phone. Its screen was spiderwebbed, the casing warped as if it had been stomped on. Harding knelt, his gloved fingers carefully prodding around it. No clear signs of a struggle in the immediate vicinity. No broken branches, no scuffed earth, no scattered personal belongings beyond the phone. The ground was slightly moist, holding faint imprints of the vehicle's tires, but nothing else obvious. The silence of the valley, usually so soothing, now felt heavy, pregnant with unspoken dread. No keys in the ignition, Miller observed, peering inside the slightly ajar driver's side door. Looks like she just left it. Or was made to, Harding countered, straightening up. That tire wasn't accidental, Ben. And a broken phone? This isn't a simple breakdown. This is a message, or a cover-up. He ran a hand over his stubbled chin, his mind already racing through possibilities. Every gut instinct, honed over 2 decades of chasing shadows in places that preferred to remain bright, screamed that something profoundly wrong had happened here. The serene beauty of Oak Valley, with its winding creek and towering oaks just beginning to shed their golden leaves, felt violated, a canvas defaced. Eleanor Vance wasn't just missing. She had been times taken asterisk. A brief, stark image flashed across Harding's mind, a stark contrast to the grim tableau before him. Just last night, Blackwood Falls had been aglow with a different kind of light. Eleanor Vance, radiant and alive, had stood amidst her artwork at the Thorn Gallery. The air had buzzed with conversation, the clinking of glasses, and an almost palpable sense of celebration. Her canvases, bold and vibrant, depicting abstract landscapes of the Blackwood Falls area, had captivated the attendees. He remembered seeing her, a woman in a flowing indigo dress, her dark hair pulled back, a genuine, unburdened smile gracing her lips as she spoke animatedly with guests. It was a smile of liberation, a woman finally claiming her space. He recalled reading about her impending divorce from Arthur Sterling, a well-known, if somewhat aloof, figure in the town's elite circles. Arthur was a developer, a man of quiet power and reputation, but whispers always followed him, whispers of control, of a possessive nature beneath his polished veneer. Eleanor's exhibition, then, had been more than just an artistic milestone. It was a declaration of independence, a defiant step out of Arthur's shadow. Marcus Thorne, the gallery owner, a lean man with a perpetually thoughtful expression and eyes that seemed to miss nothing, had been her ardent champion, and now, Harding suspected, a close friend. He had been the last person to see her. Marcus had recounted, his voice filled with a mixture of pride and paternal warmth, how Eleanor had practically floated out of the gallery, her spirit soaring. She was buzzing, Elias had said during the initial missing person report, said she was finally breathing free. Heading home, she said, to dream new dreams. Now, those dreams, Harding feared, had been brutally interrupted. The radiant glow of last night had dissolved into the cold, hard shadow of this morning. The drive to the Sterling residence was a short one, winding up a paved road that climbed the highest hill overlooking Blackwood Falls. From this vantage point, the town sprawled beneath them like a miniature painting churches with tall steeples, neat rows of houses, the glimmer of the river snaking through the valley. It was the kind of view people paid fortunes for, a testament to Arthur Sterling's status. The house itself was a sprawling modern structure of glass and steel, an architectural statement of wealth and impeccable taste. It felt less like a home and more like a carefully curated exhibit. A housekeeper, her face a mask of polite concern, let them in. She confirmed Mr. Sterling was expecting them. Arthur Sterling met them in a vast living room dominated by a panoramic view of the valley. He was impeccably dressed, even this early, in a crisp polo shirt and tailored slacks, his silver hair neatly combed. His composure was unnerving, almost too perfect. He exuded an aura of quiet authority, but beneath it, Harding sensed a subtle, almost imperceptible tension, a tightly coiled spring. "Detectives," Arthur greeted, his voice even, devoid of the tremor one might expect from a man whose wife was missing. "Please, sit." He gestured towards two plush armchairs, while he remained standing, leaning casually against the mantelpiece. It was a power play, Harding noted, a way of asserting control in his own domain. "Mr. Sterling," Harding began, his voice calm, steady, contrasting with Arthur's controlled reserve. "We're here about Eleanor. Her vehicle was found abandoned on Oak Valley Trail this morning." Arthur's eyebrows, perfectly arched, lifted fractionally. "Abandoned? Is something wrong?" His tone was curious, not alarmed. "Her front tire was slashed, Mr. Sterling, and her phone was found, smashed, beside it. There's no sign of Eleanor." Harding watched him, searching for a crack in the facade. Arthur paused, his gaze drifting to the window. "Slashed? How peculiar. Eleanor isn't one for roadside emergencies. She would have called for help." His voice held a dismissive edge, as if Eleanor's practical skills were beneath him. "I'm afraid I can't offer much assistance. You've no idea where she might be." "Can you tell us what you did last night, Mr. Sterling?" Miller asked, his voice gentler, more direct. "Last night?" Arthur turned back, meeting their gaze with an almost indifferent calm. "I played a round of golf at the club in the afternoon. Came home, had a light dinner, watched some television. Retired early. I was alone." "You weren't at the gallery opening?" Harding pressed. Arthur offered a slight, almost imperceptible smile. "No, detective. Eleanor's art isn't really my preferred style, and given our circumstances, I thought it best to give her space, let her enjoy her moment without my presence casting a shadow." The phrase "casting a shadow" hung in the air, weighted with unspoken meaning. "In those circumstances?" Harding probed, leaning forward slightly. "The divorce proceedings?" Arthur sighed, a practiced gesture of weariness. "Just irreconcilable differences, detectives. We were working through things, privately. No animosity, just a mutual understanding that it was time to move on. Eleanor wanted her independence, and I was respecting that." He spoke of it as if it were a business transaction, devoid of emotional turmoil. Too clean, Harding thought. Too sanitized. "Mr. Sterling," Harding continued, shifting tack. "Eleanor had a second phone, a private one, that she used for her lawyer and some friends. Are you aware of it?" Arthur's expression remained placid, but something in his eyes, a fleeting flicker, caught Harding's attention. "A second phone? No, I wasn't. Why would she need two?" He shrugged, feigning ignorance. "Eleanor always had her little secrets, I suppose. But a phone? That seems rather extreme." "This secret phone," Harding stated, letting the words hang in the air before delivering the punch, "was connected to your home Wi-Fi network at 3:17 a.m. this morning. Our data shows only your phone and tablet were active on the network at that time. Eleanor was, presumably, no longer home." For the first time, Arthur's polished veneer cracked, ever so slightly. His eyes widened, a momentary flash of something akin to panic, quickly masked by a practiced frown of disbelief. "Connected here? At 3 a.m.? That's impossible. A system glitch, perhaps. Or perhaps Eleanor simply left it here before she went out. I certainly didn't see it, or know about it. His denial was too swift, too vehement. His surprise felt performative, a stage act for an audience he believed he could manipulate. Harding's gaze, however, had already drifted, drawn to a detail that spoke louder than any denial. A fresh, deep scratch marred the knuckle of Arthur's right index finger, red against his pale skin. It wasn't a superficial scrape. It looked like a wound from significant impact, perhaps a struggle. Arthur, sensing Harding's focus, quickly tucked his hand behind his back. Then, as if realizing the self-incrimination, brought it back out, feigning nonchalance. Oh, this? He gestured vaguely at the injury. Just a small mishap. Was out in the garden yesterday, repairing a section of the old fence near the back property line. Caught it on a rusty nail. Annoying, really. He offered a strained smile. Harding simply nodded, his eyes lingering on the scratch for another beat. He didn't believe him. Not for a second. The story was too convenient, the scratch too fresh, the context too damning. He could almost taste the lie in the air, thick and cloying beneath the scent of expensive potpourri. 42 days. 42 days of relentless searching, of posters plastered on every lamppost in Blackwood Falls, of agonizing hope slowly curdling into despair. The town held its breath, suspended between prayer and dread, while the autumn leaves gave way to the skeletal branches of winter. Every phone call brought a fresh wave of anxiety, every passing car a flicker of expectation. Then, the call came. Not from law enforcement, but from a local volunteer group, tireless in their efforts, combing the dense woodlands that surrounded the tranquil beauty of Echo Lake. Eleanor Vance had loved this spot, often bringing her easel and paints to capture the way the light danced on the water, the majesty of the towering pines. It was a place of peace, of inspiration, now irrevocably stained by tragedy. Harding stood at the scene, the air heavy with the scent of pine needles and something far more grim. The forensic tent, stark white against the muted greens and browns of the winter forest, marked the heart of their terrible discovery. The air was cold, damp, a fitting shroud for the scene. He watched the forensics team, their movements precise and somber, their yellow hazmat suits a grotesque splash of color in the subdued landscape. The body, unmistakably Eleanor's, was found partially concealed beneath a thick layer of fallen leaves and a cluster of rhododendron bushes, a short distance from the lake's edge. The elements had taken their toll over the weeks, but the cause of death was brutally clear. The medical examiner, Dr. Anya Sharma, confirmed it with a quiet, grave tone. Severe head trauma, Detective. Appears to be the primary cause. A blunt force impact. She pointed to a specific area on Eleanor's skull, visible even through the careful forensic handling. The weapon, whatever it was, had left a devastating mark. Harding felt a familiar, cold knot tighten in his stomach. This wasn't just a missing persons case anymore. It was murder. The quiet anxiety that had gripped Blackwood Falls for weeks now erupted into a profound shock, quickly followed by a wave of grief and anger. Eleanor Vance, the vibrant artist who had dared to seek her freedom, had found only a desolate end in the very woods she had loved. The picturesque Blackwood Falls now carried a new, indelible scar, a shadow that stretched long and cold, refusing to retreat. And Harding knew, with a certainty that settled deep in his bones, that this was only the beginning of a far more complex and darker story. The intervening decade had not been kind to the sterling name, nor to the collective memory of Blackwood Falls. The initial shock had dulled into a persistent ache, a wound that refused to truly heal, festering beneath the town's placid surface. But for some, the passage of time had merely sharpened the edges of their grief and indignation. The courtroom, a solemn chamber within the old county courthouse, bore the weight of those 10 years. Its high ceilings and dark wood paneling seemed to absorb all sound, leaving only a hushed tension that hummed beneath the fluorescent lights. Arthur Sterling, no longer the composed man of 40-odd, now sat at the defense table, his silver hair neatly coiffed, a stark contrast to the deeper lines etched around his eyes and mouth. His tailored suit, expensive as ever, could not entirely conceal the subtle slump in his shoulders. Yet his expression remained unreadable, a carefully constructed mask of polite indifference. He looked less like a man accused of murder and more like a weary executive enduring a particularly tedious board meeting. A slight, almost imperceptible air of defiance clung to him, a faint scent of a man who believed himself above this scrutiny. Detective Elias Harding, now a seasoned veteran with an additional decade of grim experience etched into the corners of his eyes, took the stand. His uniform jacket, still crisp, couldn't hide the deeper weariness that settled into his posture, a burden carried not just from Eleanor's case, but from countless others. His gaze, however, remained sharp, unwavering as he looked across at Arthur, a flicker of an old certainty reigniting in his chest. He swore the oath with a steady voice, the words echoing with the gravity of the years. The prosecutor, a sharp-suited woman named Anya Sharma, who had inherited the cold case from a retired colleague, began her questioning. Her voice was clear, methodical, building the narrative brick by painstaking brick. Detective Harding, you were the lead investigator on the disappearance and subsequent murder of Eleanor Vance 10 years ago? That's correct, Harding affirmed, his voice resonating with authority. Could you please walk the jury through the evidence gathered against the defendant, Mr. Arthur Sterling? Harding nodded, turning his gaze slightly towards the jury box, a collection of faces ranging from stern to curious to outright weary. We began by examining the nature of the relationship between Eleanor Vance and Mr. Sterling, particularly in the months leading up to her disappearance. He paused, letting the implications settle. What we found was a pattern of controlling behavior. He elaborated, describing how Eleanor's once vibrant spirit had seemed to dim under Arthur's pervasive influence. We obtained emails and text messages, some exchanged with her friend, Mr. Marcus Thorne, and others with her divorce attorney. These weren't just the usual communications of a dissolving marriage. They painted a picture of a woman increasingly fearful for her safety, for her autonomy. He recounted snippets from those messages, carefully selected by the prosecution. Asterisk. He's always watching, Marcus. Always. Even when he's not here, I feel him. Asterisk. And another to her lawyer. Asterisk. I just want out, whatever it takes. I just need to be free of him. Asterisk. The words, though old, still carried a chilling resonance, a ghostly whisper from the past. Arthur, at the defense table, shifted almost imperceptibly, a muscle in his jaw twitching. His lawyer, a formidable woman with an air of sophisticated aggression, made a note, preparing for cross-examination. Harding continued, his voice steady. Mr. Sterling, when initially questioned, maintained he had no knowledge of a second private phone Eleanor used. However, forensic analysis of their home Wi-Fi network provided a contradictory truth. He explained the timestamps, the specific IP addresses. At 3:17 a.m. on the morning Eleanor disappeared, this secret phone, which Mr. Sterling claimed not to know about, connected to the home Wi-Fi. Our records show Mr. Sterling's own devices were the only others active on the network at that precise time. Eleanor's official phone, the one he acknowledged, was already found smashed by her abandoned vehicle. A ripple went through the courtroom. The implication was stark. Arthur was not only aware of the phone, but had interacted with it, or at least been in its proximity, at a crucial time. Harding vividly recalled Arthur's clumsy attempt to feign surprise, his almost theatrical denial. The memory fueled his conviction now. And further, Detective Sharma prompted, what did your digital forensics team uncover regarding Mr. Sterling's internet activity during the period of his wife's disappearance? Harding fixed his gaze on Arthur, who now stared straight ahead, his jaw tight. Our investigation revealed a series of unsettling search queries on Mr. Sterling's personal computer. In the weeks following Eleanor Vance's disappearance, while extensive search parties were out, while her family was distraught, Mr. Sterling was performing searches for dating websites, specifically premium membership options and profiles in nearby cities. A collective gasp, louder this time, filled the room. The sheer callousness of the act, even 10 years on, was palpable. It painted Arthur not just as a potentially controlling husband, but as a man utterly devoid of empathy, perhaps even of basic human decency, towards the woman he was still legally married to, the mother of his theoretical children, a missing person. Did Mr. Sterling cooperate fully with your investigation in the initial stages? Sharma pressed, her voice laced with a subtle disdain. No, he did not, Harding replied flatly. He refused repeated requests for a polygraph examination. He also became uncooperative when we requested certain financial documents, claiming they were irrelevant to a missing persons case. Harding recounted the frustrating dance with Arthur, the endless legal roadblocks, the sense of an invisible wall being erected around the suspect. And lastly, Detective Harding, Sharma concluded, her voice hardening. Do you recall anything unusual about Mr. Sterling's physical appearance when you first interviewed him, the morning after Eleanor Vance's disappearance? Harding's eyes met Arthur's across the courtroom. Yes, he had a fresh, deep scratch on the knuckle of his right index finger. He claimed it was from repairing a garden fence. Harding paused, letting the memory of his disbelief hang in the air. I found his explanation unconvincing. It looked like the kind of injury one might sustain in a struggle. The defense attorney, Mrs. Evelyn Reed, rose, a cool, confident smile playing on her lips. Thank you, Detective. Now, if I may, her voice was like polished ice. Detective Harding, you've presented a formidable list of circumstantial evidence. However, correct me if I'm wrong, but there was no direct forensic evidence, was there? No DNA of Mr. Sterling found on Miss Vance's body? No murder weapon recovered with his fingerprints? Harding, though internally frustrated, maintained his composure. No, there was no direct DNA evidence linking Mr. Sterling to the body or the immediate crime scene, and the murder weapon was never recovered. The admission felt like a surrender, a concession to the very technicality that had plagued the case for years. So, despite all these patterns and implications, you have no physical proof that Mr. Sterling was present at the scene of the crime or physically harmed Miss Vance? Reed pressed, her voice dripping with rhetorical challenge. The totality of the circumstantial evidence strongly suggests otherwise, Harding stated, his jaw tight. Reed scoffed lightly. Detective, strongly suggests is not the same as proves beyond a reasonable doubt, is it? Now, about this scratch. Mr. Sterling testified that he was repairing an old fence. Is it not plausible that such an activity could result in a superficial injury? It was not superficial, Mrs. Reed, Harding countered, and his demeanor when I questioned him about it was evasive. Evasive, or simply annoyed at being badgered about a minor household accident while his wife was missing? Reed shot back, attempting to paint Harding as overzealous. And the secret phone, is it not possible that Miss Vance, being in the process of a divorce, may have simply forgotten her phone at the home she still shared with Mr. Sterling before leaving that night? The data shows it connected at 3:17 a.m., Harding reiterated, long after she would have left for the gallery, and much later than she would typically be out. Or, Reed pressed on, undeterred, could the Wi-Fi network have been accessed externally? Hacked, perhaps? Blackwood Falls is not immune to such things, is it? Our cyber forensics team found no evidence of external intrusion, Harding said, but the seed of doubt had been sown. Reed then pivoted, her voice softening, though her eyes remained sharp. Let's talk about Eleanor Vance. You mentioned she was seeking her independence. Was she also, perhaps, seeking new relationships? New acquaintances? Harding hesitated. She was expanding her social circle. Yes, indeed. She had just met Mr. Marcus Thorne, a man who, by all accounts, was quite taken with her, and she was, as you presented through her emails, looking to move on. Could it be, Detective, that in her quest for independence and new connections, she inadvertently stumbled into trouble? That her disappearance and tragic death were the result of a confrontation with someone times other times than her soon-to-be ex-husband? Someone from her times new times life, perhaps? Reed gestured vaguely, painting a picture of a woman whose newfound freedoms might have led her to a dangerous path, deflecting the blame squarely away from Arthur. There was no shortage of people in Blackwood Falls, or passing through, Who could have been involved? Was there, detective? People whose DNA was never tested against the evidence? People who may have had a motive that wasn't as neatly tied up in a domestic dispute? Harding bit back a retort, forced to concede that without direct evidence, other scenarios, however remote, could be imagined. The defense rested on the very ambiguity that had haunted the prosecution for a decade. The jury deliberated for 3 agonizing days. For Elias Harding, each minute felt like an hour, each hour a day. He sat in the courtroom, watching Arthur Sterling, watching Eleanor's family, who sat in the gallery, their faces etched with 10 years of grief, and now, a renewed, raw hope. Marcus Thorne, his face pale and drawn, sat with them, his eyes rarely leaving Arthur. Finally, the bailiff's voice sliced through the tension. All rise. The courtroom doors creaked open, and the jury filed in, their faces unreadable. Arthur Sterling stood, his composure intact, a faint tremor in his hands the only tell. Harding's heart pounded, a primal rhythm in his chest. The foreman, a middle-aged woman with tired eyes, handed the verdict slip to the bailiff, who passed it to the judge. The judge, his expression grave, read the words aloud, words that would forever reverberate through the lives of everyone present. In the matter of the state versus Arthur Sterling, on the charge of murder in the first degree, we the jury find the defendant, not guilty, The words hung in the air, a physical blow. A collective gasp, sharp and involuntary, tore through the gallery. A choked sob broke the silence, quickly followed by a cacophony of whispers, gasps, and outright cries of disbelief. Eleanor's mother slumped in her seat, her father's arm immediately going around her, his face a mask of utter devastation. Marcus Thorne closed his eyes, a single tear tracing a path down his cheek, his hands clenched into white-knuckled fists. Arthur Sterling, for the first time, allowed a fleeting, almost imperceptible smirk to touch his lips. He sat down, a subtle relaxation of his posture, as if a great weight had been lifted. The facade of indifference had served its purpose. He had walked away. The prosecutor, her face a storm of professional disappointment and personal outrage, immediately conferred with her team. Moments later, she rose. Your Honor, given the overwhelming circumstantial evidence presented, the state moves to introduce an additional charge, voluntary manslaughter. She argued, her voice trembling slightly with suppressed anger, that Arthur's known controlling behavior, his possessive nature, and his rage at Eleanor's pursuit of independence could have escalated into a fatal confrontation, a crime committed in the heat of passion, even if not premeditated murder. But the defense attorney, Mrs. Reed, was already on her feet, a triumphant glint in her eyes. Objection, Your Honor. The statute of limitations for voluntary manslaughter in this state is 7 years. 10 years have passed since Miss Vance's death. This charge is legally inadmissible. The judge, his face a picture of grim resignation, consulted his legal texts, then looked at the prosecutor with regret. The defense is correct. While regrettable, the statute of limitations has indeed expired for that particular charge. Motion denied. Another wave of despair washed over the gallery. Justice, it seemed, was not merely blind, but also bound by arbitrary timelines. Arthur Sterling, the man widely believed by many in Blackwood Falls to be Eleanor's killer, was truly free. He walked out of the courtroom moments later, his lawyer shielding him from the barrage of reporters and cameras that had descended on the courthouse. He offered no statements, no apologies, no expressions of sorrow for Eleanor, just a silent, resolute departure. A ghost slipping into the afternoon sun, leaving behind a profound sense of wrongness, an unfillable void in the pursuit of truth. The Blackwood Falls diner had changed little in 10 years, a comforting constancy in a town that still wrestled with its ghosts. The red vinyl booths were a little more worn, the coffee a little stronger, but the scent of fried eggs and yesterday's newspapers still permeated the air. Detective Harding sat opposite Marcus Thorne, a cooling mug of coffee between them. Marcus looked older, his thoughtful eyes now holding a permanent shadow of sorrow, but his spirit, though bruised, remained unbroken. "How can this happen, Elias?" Marcus asked, his voice raw, barely above a whisper. He ran a hand through his thinning hair, his gaze fixed on some distant, unseen point. How can he just walk away? After everything? After what he did? Harding stirred his coffee, the spoon clinking softly against the ceramic. The system, Marcus, it requires direct proof, reasonable doubt. He had a good lawyer who exploited every single crack in our case, every single piece of ambiguity. Without the weapon, without his DNA, it's a hell of a hurdle to clear. He knew it was a hollow explanation, one he had given countless times, but it offered little comfort to those who truly sought justice. But we times know asterisk, Marcus insisted, his voice rising slightly. Eleanor knew. She was terrified of him. That phone, those searches, it all points to him. Harding looked out the window, at the familiar main street of Blackwood Falls. The quaint shop fronts, the tree-lined avenues, the distant glimpse of the church steeple. It all looked so peaceful, so idyllic, yet beneath it pulsed a dark, unsettling current. We believed that too. Still do, Marcus, but belief isn't evidence in a courtroom. He paused, his gaze softening, turning back to Marcus. There's something I never told you. Never made public. It wasn't enough to build a case on. Not enough to even officially pursue without jeopardizing what little we times did times have. Marcus leaned forward, his eyes wide with a desperate, rekindled hope. What is it? During the initial investigation, when we were canvassing the area around Oak Valley Trail, we had an anonymous tip, Harding began, his voice dropping. A witness, too frightened to come forward officially, claimed they saw another vehicle leaving the vicinity of the trail. Not long after, Eleanor's car would have been left there. A dark sedan, distinctive model, though they couldn't recall the exact make. Marcus frowned. Another car? So, someone else was involved? Harding nodded slowly. We traced that vehicle, as best we could, to a local business. The owner, he's an influential figure in Blackwood Falls, a pillar of the community, so to speak. Someone with long-standing business ties to Arthur Sterling. Harding didn't name the person, but the implication hung heavy in the air. It was just a loose connection, Marcus. Not enough to prove complicity. Not enough for a search warrant or even a formal interview without a stronger link. We couldn't prove he was there, or that he was involved, but it was enough to make us wonder. Enough to sow a seed of doubt that Arthur might not have been alone that night. A new, chilling realization dawned in Marcus's eyes. So, you think Arthur had help? That someone helped him cover it up? Harding shrugged, a gesture of profound weariness. We looked into it, discreetly. The influential figure, his business dealings, his connections, everything was clean on paper. He had a solid alibi for the night. Eleanor disappeared, backed by others. But the anonymous tip, the specific model of car, it never quite left my mind. It was a ghost in the corners of the file. Marcus. A whisper we could never quite grasp. The two men sat in silence for a moment, the weight of the revelation settling heavily between them. The idea that Eleanor's death was not just a domestic tragedy, but potentially a meticulously orchestrated crime with powerful accomplices, made the injustice even more unbearable. So, what now? Marcus finally asked, his voice cracking. Does Eleanor ever get justice, Elias? Harding looked out the window again, at the street outside. The afternoon sun cast long shadows, mimicking the unseen ones that stretched through Blackwood Falls. In some cases, Marcus, he said, his voice quiet, almost a whisper. Justice isn't always the truth. And the truth, sometimes, it's too big, too complex for the system alone to encompass. Too many powerful people, too many threads weaving through the fabric of a town like this. We got what we could, and it wasn't enough. The words hung in the air, a stark, haunting epitaph. Eleanor Vance's death remained an open wound in the heart of Blackwood Falls, a testament to a truth that eluded the grasp of justice. The ghost of that truth, elusive and persistent, would forever linger in the quiet corners and whispered secrets of the seemingly peaceful town, never truly buried, always watching.